Hey, you beautiful beings. Welcome to Empowered Human with Nina Garcia. I am your host, and you are listening to the Throwback episodes. Yeah, I have officially taken a pause on creating new episodes for the podcast so that I can focus on writing the book. It became very clear that while I have loved doing the podcast, I'm getting these episodes out every week to you all piecemeal. I was like, no more, no more. You all were like, please, please, can you get us all those skills and tools, Nina, in one area so that we can do the empowered human journey, so that we can really see what it's like from start to finish, to which I say, yes, absolutely. Let me get this to you. Yes. So what you're going to be hearing is this. You're going to be hearing throwback episodes from all 6 seasons, okay? It's not going to be every episode, so don't freak out on me yet. But it is going to be some of the episodes that were highlighted, that were popular, that we think, maybe you all missed and we want to bring it back. You're going to be hearing throwback episodes, and I am going to be listening along with you. I too want to hear about the journey and experience the journey that I had as we moved from Triggered Can We Play With That, the original podcast, all the way to Empowered Human with Nina Garcia. So you're going to hear personal stories. You're going to hear interviews. You're going to be given skills in every episode. Yes, you're going to be given tools in every episode for you to become skilled in. It is totally up to you whether you want to listen. If it's not the episode for you, skip to the next week, right? You just take what works for you, leave what doesn't. And if there's some stuff you're curious about, why don't you just go ahead and put that on the shelf? The podcast has always been about putting resources in the hands of people without needing to pay for it, right? And so this is no different. Even with these throwback episodes, what you're going to hear is this. We're going through, just as I said, you're going to still hear me talk at the beginning of each episode, letting you know, hey, we've had a transition. You're going to hear the original intro to the episode. You're going to hear the show music, and then you're going to hear the full original episode. This could mean that dates are off, that times are off, that people are talked about, that it may no longer be in our lives, right? Just be aware of that. At the very end of the episode, you're going to see this face again come back to remind you that it was a throwback episode and to maybe offer you some adventure challenges as you move from week to week, right? Though the format of the episode did change over the years that we've done this podcast, the value is still there. So if you like something, definitely hit me up on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina and be like, Nina, I love that throwback episode about XYZ thing. Yes, fill in the blank with that. Let me know. And if there's something that you're looking for in the meantime, also hit me up on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina and let me know. Otherwise, stay curious and enjoy the ride, folks. I'll be right along there with you. Welcome to Empowered Human, the dramatically playful podcast that invites you to heal humanity, the one within you, me, and the world at large. I'm your host, drama therapist, empowerment specialist, and not to mention empowered human, Nina Garcia. And I'm so stoked you're joining me on the journey. Every Wednesday, you are invited to explore transforming from powered to empowered with genuinely human stories of courageous existence, healing from invalidation, and truly belonging to you. So wherever you are on the spectrum, from empowerment curious to empowered human ambassador, this podcast is designed to humanize. Get ready to lean into your edge, heal your worldview, and finally belong to you. This is Empowered Human. Hey you, Nina here. This episode plays with race, ethnicity, cultural orientation, and identity, so I'm curious. Are you ready to play? So first thing we usually do is I actually invite everyone to take a breath. So let's just... Such a powerful tool, the breath. And immediately we're going to get started right off the bat. This is our first conversation session, Erika. Typically, I would be the host and you would be the one sharing your moment with me and me walking us through the sort of conversation steps. However, I would not ask my clients to do anything I have not done before or that I know isn't professionally sound. And I would not ask anyone here to do a conversation session without knowing
what's it like, right? So you and I are going to just have a conversation session, and of which, the intent is, can we take something that we know is a hard conversation topic and can we just talk about it? Can we take a hard moment and turn it into a teachable moment? Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I do also want to say, full disclosure to our audience, we do have a dual relationship in that not only are you on here as a sort of co-host for this episode, but you are my sister.
Well, that's biologically proven. So,
yes. She's also a comedian, ladies and gentlemen. I wish that she would actually do stand-up because she's so funny. But hopefully you'll get a little taste of that today. And if not, we're just having a session. No pressure, Erika.
Yeah, no, I think I need you to lower the bar for these people. So,
all right. So, first things first, we always want to set an intent, right? We're thinking about, this is a hard conversation. Let's know what the agenda is from the get-go. Well, the agenda is that we're going to take a hard conversation, make it a teachable moment, which means that you and I are collaborating on this. We're not going to go head to head. This is not a battle of I'm trying to change how you feel about it or how, you trying to change how I feel about it. It's really about, let me see you as a human being and know that your story matters simply because you exist, period. You have an inherent value and your story has inherent worth. Make sense?
Yep.
Beautiful. All right. So we've already done step 1, set the intention, right? So we want to move to step 2. Now, for everyone else, they would have filled out a survey. I did briefly show Erika the survey before this. You can go to HoustonCreativeArtsTherapy.com/triggered and submit your own moment for an upcoming episode. And I went in through it and I did it myself. And there's a few questions in there, one of which is, what's the title of your moment? And the title of my moment was, I'm not your white friend. So off the bat, Erika, what's your experience of this? As I say, I'm not your white friend. That's the title of my moment.
I don't know why that just reminds me of, ain't you pal, fool? But,
and is that from something? What's that from? Or is it just like a line in your head?
It's just a line in my head, but
ain't you pal, fool?
I don't know why, but I think it kind of reminds me of being a token. I usually hear people say like a token Black person. When you're saying I'm not your white friend, I'm not your token white friend for some reason. But
ooh, Erika already going deep on the layers. Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're getting into today. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're uncomfortable with topics around race, culture, ethnicity, identity, honestly, I can't imagine you'd be listening to this podcast if you were troubled with any of those things. But otherwise, this is your trigger warning for Triggered. Can we play with that? We's about to play with it. So,
I'm triggered. I don't know about you.
What support do you need, Erika?
No, this is no, just to be authentic. I generally don't talk about these kinds of topics because of how touchy they are. So
yeah. What are you noticing happening in your body? Typically, I would be saying now how I relate to this moment. What are you noticing happening in your body after this moment?
An uneasiness of the conversation we're about to have.
Oh, this is uneasy territory. We're going to be going where no people have gone before, right? Not to say that people haven't had these conversations before, but that you and I have never had this moment before, right? This is a unique moment in time. We will never be able to recreate this moment, right? We acknowledge that it's an uneasy space, and now let's collaborate and let's walk together, yeah?
Okay, let's do this.
All right. So for my own moment, locating it, in my own body, I'm not your white friend. I feel like there's an anger in my chest emotionally. I can locate that. Locating, we want to think emotions. What's happening in your body? What's happening imagery-wise? Are there thoughts or images popping up into your head? So I did already express anger as an emotion there. I think disbelief is sort of this thought, like, how are you not getting this? How are you not getting this? And in my body, it's like a warmth, and I almost feel like an armor that's crept up into my back, which clearly tells me, right, if I'm thinking armor and warmth in my chest and there's anger here, I'm already getting defensive, right? There's already something that my body is communicating to me as, whoa, Nina, we may need to protect ourselves from something in the environment, right? This is, of course, the very definition of being triggered or any threat response. But by being triggered in particular, we're talking about a threat response that's not just relative to this moment, but it's bigger or older than this moment. And so when we talk about, I'm going to take the words you said, the tokenizing, right? Tokenizing is a white friend, which I don't think I've ever heard before. And I'm now like, can we explore that? That it is bigger and older than just the moment I had with this person, which I will now tell, right? That's the next step is let's tell the story. Are you ready for me to paint you a picture of what happened?
All right, let's do this.
Okay. So in a nutshell, what happens is this. I was having a conversation with a colleague, a professional colleague, right? So I'm a psychotherapist, they're a psychotherapist. And long story short, excuse me, the woman turns around and says something akin to, so she says to me, we're talking about race and culture, and I'm saying, I don't identify as a race, right? Which is like baffling to this woman who identifies as white. Like, let's be clear, she does identify as white. It's not a role I'm ascribing to her. That's how she is, right? And so she tells me, even after I say I don't identify as a race, I do identify as Puerto Rican, she's not getting it. And she texts me and she's like, I would love to hear more about you not identifying as a race. The person I'm dating doesn't identify as a gender. I always seek to understand the undefined places. The binaries don't even really exist, in my opinion. And that's literally like word for word what was messaged to me. So already off the bat, my experience of this is, I just told you I don't identify as a race. That's not my story. And I hear you saying, you would love to hear more about me not identifying as a race. But already you're putting up as like, there's something that I should be identifying as, and I don't. So I feel othered, right? I feel like, I'm not a part of the human pack, right? I don't get to be a part of that. But I think, that's the moment. But what was really triggering for me, Erika, was when she said, I always seek to understand the undefined places, as if my story was undefined, as if my not identifying with a race meant that I was undefined. It communicated to me, I don't exist, that my story doesn't exist in the bigger picture. And it was very triggering, to say the least, but it wasn't triggering because of what she was saying in the moment. And that's the big thing, is that, right now I've just explained to you the moment, and we would typically go into the psychoeducation piece of like, well, how did you know you were triggering, and what was so triggering, and how do we discover that? But even from what I've just said so far, where do you sit with it, hearing what she said and sort of how I'm relating to it?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting that she says she always seeks to understand the undefined places, but the binaries don't exist, in her opinion. So basically what I'm hearing is, I want to hear you out, but your opinion doesn't really matter because I've already made it up in my head that you have to fall one way or the other.
Yes. Oh, you get it, right?
Yes.
So,
it would make me laugh if I read that and be angry at the same time. But yeah, disbelief kind of thing.
Yes, right. So we'll move into the psychoeducation piece here of like how human that is for both being able to, like you said, I want to laugh and I want to be angry. And like, because we're human, you can hold both of those things at the same time, right? Even if they seem seemingly opposing, right? At the same time that she can say, a part of me, Nina, doesn't believe that the binary exists, but also I absolutely fit in the binary, and trying to figure out why you don't fit in the binary, right? And so it is really true. She can hold both of those ideas. Parts of her are wrestling with this. And so she's trying to understand. And so I have to come in knowing that ahead of time, that what she's actually done is a microaggression, maybe even a macro, but it's an aggression. But she doesn't realize it. And this is often what happens with people when we say things that offend someone else because they're culturally different than us. And when I say culturally different, I mean as individuals, right? If we can imagine that every individual on the planet Earth has a different individual culture, that would be pretty fair to say, right? No two people are alike.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
I agree with
We're
that.
not exactly identical. And so if we all have an individual culture, then I can understand that parts of her may be wrestling internally with these cultural pieces, right? That she could have been taught multiple things, and a part of her can believe this and that. And that I can look at her and say, she's not intentionally aggressing against me. She didn't intentionally say this to be like, you know, you're a lesser than me, Nina. I do not believe that was her intention. Not in this moment. And nonetheless, the impact, right? Because intention is not the same as impact. The impact of it was, you don't belong, Nina. Your story doesn't belong here. And also, I'm trying to figure out why it doesn't belong to me, right? So there's a bit of an empathy in that, and definitely of me having to hold even more space for her not understanding why I don't fit in the binary, right?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
And I guess not to cut you off, but I think it's kind of hard, and even for me to think about race and what that actually means, because I think it means a lot of different things to people. So I guess like the way you think of race versus the way she's thinking of race, I mean, it's probably not the same thing. Is it more so what we look like? Is it just the skin tone? You know, I mean, I guess when we're talking about race right now, what are we defining race as?
Yes. So I'm so glad you said that, because it is so different to every person. So I come from an identity, humanity-based lens, right? So when clients come into my office, or when I look at people, because this is genuinely how I intend to exist in the world, is I look at people through this humanity-based lens, right? And what that means is there are a bunch of facets to your identity that are important to you as a human being. Through your existence on this planet, these are the things that have become important to you. So for some people, their skin color is important, right? When white people talk about white privilege or white fragility, or anybody talks about white people, and there are people who identify as white, and that's important to them. That's a piece of their identity, right? It's the same thing for, let's say, if you're a Black person. It is a piece of your identity that your skin is Black, and that is a piece of who you are. That should feel empowered in who you are. However, because of other things in other people's narratives, this is where we start getting into problems with race. Is if we start saying, my skin color is better than your skin color, right? As opposed to, boy, we're both just awesome because we are who we are as human beings, and my skin happens to be white and your skin happens to be Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the tools that I talk about using when it comes to hard conversations is recognizing where there needs to be spectrum thinking. And so in this case, if we could set up a spectrum, I think it's going to help, because the way that I look at people and talk with people is, of course, through this identity lens. So if white is important to you, that you're white, okay, I'm going to accept that. You've already decided that that's important to you. And all I need to know is it hurting you? Is it hurting anyone else, right? If you come in and you say to me that you're Black, I'm going to say, great, right? I agree with you because it is what you have told me you are. And is it hurting you? Is it hurting anyone else? If it is or isn't, then we process that, right? But whatever you come in with, if that's a piece, then I'm going to honor that because you've told me it's important to you as a human being, period. So if we set up this spectrum, though, for those of us who do not identify as white or Black, like myself, we set up the spectrum. And now what I say is, I can recognize that although white is not a piece of my identity, I do not identify as that in any way, shape, or form. I can also say I benefit from light-skinned privilege, period. I recognize that my existence in the world has me, quote unquote, passing as white, and it's definitely light-skinned, right? I can't identify as a dark-skinned person. I could identify as brown. I don't identify as a color, though. So I also don't prefer that term. Excuse me. And I don't want us to get too bogged down in terms, but I do want to get back to this spectrum thinking piece. So spectrum thinking is, if we could set up from 1 to 5, right? With 5 being the darkest you could be and 1 being the least dark you could be. You still with me?
Yes.
Okay. So if 1 is the least dark I can be, I might say I'm titling that white, right? 5 is the most dark I can be. I might title that Black. right? Now, this becomes an issue when we look at 2, 3, and 4, and I say, okay, so what am I looking at? Is 3 do I call that some neutral or tan? Do I call 2 like light creme? Do I call 4 mocha? I don't know, right? So if we can get rid of the colored terms, right? Literally ascribing it to a color, which has historically been a thing, and we can start adding just light to dark, then one becomes the lightest, right? It's light-skinned, right? 5 is the darkest, dark-skinned. 3, right, your medium is medium-skinned, right? Then 2 becomes light to medium, and 4 is medium to dark. And now I can tell you, oh, I think I'm light to medium. I could identify as that. I can see that being if what you're trying to do is only look at my skin color. But my skin color does not equate to the narrative that is ascribed to skin colors in the history of colors, as far as people are concerned. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, I think that definitely makes sense because, and I'm just thinking like in terms of makeup, when you go get makeup, you're looking at your actual skin tone and you have to acknowledge what you are. Otherwise, if you put something on too white or too dark, it's not going to look right compared to the rest of your body. You want it to blend in ideally. So when it comes to skin tone, yeah, I think it's easier for us to say, yes, I fall into these skin tone categories versus like what you're saying, everything that's associated with being white or black, and the history of all that here in America.
Yes. And I do love that you just said here in America, right? Because that is a part of my cultural piece. Like if there's anyone internationally listening, this conversation is going to sound very different because they may not have grown up with this narrative, right? This American piece. So that's another piece of the identity, but one we're not going to explore right now. So just like you said, I think it was so great to just bring in this piece of like, when we look at makeup, if you're looking at white or black, there are colors, right? You can say that. But if I'm looking for something that is like a foundation, a base, right? And for all my people who don't wear makeup out there, just hang with us. We'll get back to it in a few seconds, right? You can have a light-skinned, dark-skinned, medium, light to medium, medium to dark, right? And so if you want to know about my skin color, that's what I would identify as, but I don't identify as a color because there's a huge narrative behind what it means to identify as white and a huge narrative behind what it means to identify as black. But just because I don't identify as in that box or in this box does not mean that I don't have my own defined point on the continuum. So what I've run into throughout my life, which is why this moment has become so triggering, what I've run into throughout my life is over and over again being expected to fit into this box or that box. And the pain then that causes when you realize you have not been put into that box consistently. And so what ends up happening is every time I say, well, I'm Puerto Rican, I identify as, fill in the blank, all these other identity pieces, but I don't identify as a race, what you keep getting back is things like every time I look at a form, any government form, and you have to choose race, Hispanic is not a race. And when I say that, what I mean is Hispanic has not been considered a race, right? Because race is a construct. We cannot tell everyone, right? We can't tell from looking at everyone what race makeup you might be. And so every time I look at a form, what I have seen is I don't exist here. I don't exist here because I can't check white or black. Growing up, right? Not just the forms, growing up, I remember, now I can say our mother because you're my sister, right? But my mother squaring off with me in elementary and saying, when we looked at the primarily white school I was in, you are not white, Nina. You are Boricua, right? Which is Puerto Rican, right? You are Boricua. You are not white. Growing up, getting a little older, getting into my adolescent years, I remember sitting across the table from my beautiful soul of a grandfather who is black. If you were to look at him physically, right, would go into the color category of the darkest, without a doubt. However, looking across the table at him, my mother saying, he's not black, he's Puerto Rican. And being able to sit with this, and these are the narratives that I grew up with. And I could even understand how you being my sister may have had a totally different experience growing up than I did, right? You may not have had these moments with mom or grandpa or the family. But I did. And so every time growing up, I'm like, man, so there's white people, there's black people, but and it never mixed. Mixed was never a term that was used for us. We were Puerto Rican, period. We were a people who were of diverse colors. And that's what made us so beautiful. And there was a lot of pride growing up for me as a Puerto Rican until the moment I was in undergrad, my first moment to experience Puerto Rican on Puerto Rican hate. And this may be similar or likened to when you have black on black crime, white on white, right? And it's like Puerto Rican on Puerto Rican hate. And I'd always had such pride. And I met this other Puerto Rican woman, and she looked at me in this conversation, and she was being really mean with other things. And I could tell that there was something she didn't like about me. I didn't know what it was until out of her mouth came, if you were to go back to Puerto Rico, they would be ashamed of you. You don't speak the language. You don't eat the food. You are not Puerto Rican. And I felt such shame, which is what she was casting on me. I felt that to the degree that I remember that weekend I was in another city. My mother drove to come pick me up and take me back to college because I could not ride back with her. I was in so much pain of my whole life being told you're not white. I'm certainly not black, although we know that genetically that's in our background as Puerto Ricans. And and I'm also not Puerto Rican. Like, where do I belong? Why can't I just be me? How many boxes do I have to check for you to tell me that it's okay for me to own my story? And that, all of these things that are older than this moment, that's all the stuff that was triggered when she said, in the undefined places that you are, Nina, was, I really want to curse here. I'm not going to, because then I'll have to click, expletive deleted on this episode, but like F, when and where do I get to exist and just say, I am who I am, period. I shouldn't need to explain it, period. This is who I am. This is me, right? So where we are, at least in this conversation, is, how do you discover that? Though it's through those moments. This is how I know I was triggered in this moment, and how I was also able to see it's not, we'll call her Betsy. It's not Betsy who's triggering me. It's all this other stuff that from the one line she said that invalidated this present moment. She did invalidate me in that present moment. It's that one moment that triggered the landscape of moments that has occurred before that, which obviously is more than what I've just expressed here. So I know I just went on a big old thing. I just drove us through a whole world of stuff. Erika, what are you sitting with in this moment?
I mean, it's 11 o'clock. I think we need a drink at this point. For everything that you've just said, you've got unloaded a lot there.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I will say my body, what I'm noticing now is like, I'm feeling the anger. I'm feeling queasy, right? I'm feeling like, I know that there are tears there, but they don't feel like they're presently wanting to come out. But, it is a lot. It is a lot. And I won't ask you about your story unless you, of course, want to share something. So I won't ask you about your story in this moment because we wouldn't normally be sisters sharing a moment. Is there anything in your own human moment, though, in your humanity that feels like it needs to be shared in this moment? And do feel free to say, not right now.
I mean, I guess one of the questions I have, so when you fill out the census, or any of these forms that often ask you, what do you identify? Like, what is your race? And, then they've got the ethnicity question underneath it. What do you actually check for your race?
So this is a great question. I can say this on air now. If the form allows, I have crossed out race and I have written in this is a construct. I'm not even kidding. On several forms, I have crossed it out and said this is a construct, and I have gone to the ethnicity question and I've checked Hispanic. If it does not allow for it, and this has changed, I have clicked other once upon a time, like if it's an online form and you can't input something. And only most recently, as in of the last 6 months, was there a form I went into to get my license changed. And I went into it and she said, I understand she looked at me. I didn't even have to say anything. And this was I imagine, right, if we think dark skin, I imagine a Black identifying American across from me. And she says, I know that you didn't check anything here, but I'm going to need you to check something. I said, well, listen, I got, if you include Spanish people as white, I got white in my background. If you include Black people from Africa as African, I got African in my background. If you include indigenous, which is the Taino people of Puerto Rico, then I got indigenous too. So you tell me, what would you like to check? And I didn't say it with disrespect, but I did say it with a little bit of passion, and I'm smiling with her. And she smiles back at me and she says, I'm going to check all of them for you. And I don't know if that was the case, honestly. I did not look. But it was this
you don't know what race you are on your license?
No, I'm not. I don't have it right by me, but
you might want to check that.
So, I mean, it gets me impassioned, right? Because I'm like, listen, if what you're really asking me is what color is my skin, then start calling me light-skinned. Stop calling me white, because it describes a whole narrative that, guess what, I didn't get to grow up with. I remember thinking, once in the past year, somebody said something akin to this, because this isn't the only moment. And I thought to myself, well, if I could have grown up thinking I was white, you mean I missed out on a whole privilege? Like, what? And of course, I'm playing with that, but
yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes with I identify as white, quote unquote, that I did not get to grow up with. So please, I'm not your white friend. I'm not your white passing. I am not white if you see me on the street. I'm light-skinned. If you feel like you must identify me as a color. But please, if you know me, if you talk to me after you hear this episode, call me Nina. That's my name. Call me Nina. Call me human. If you must identify me, call me light-skinned if you must. But otherwise, I'm Boricua. I am Puerto Rican. That's a whole nother continuum there, because I went to Puerto Rico, and I'll tell you, they are Puerto Rican. I identify as American Puerto Rican, and identify my parents as Puerto Rican American, right? We're not going to get into that. But this is to say, of course, there's a spectrum. What came up for you? I saw your mouth went like, ah.
Yeah, no, I think what I'm hearing, though, is that, like, when it comes to race, it sounds like you've identified as several different things, like during your life, like from just checking other to, or like the fact that you're telling them your survey question isn't valid because race is a social construct. So I'm not going to fill it out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. Yes, because, my story has not existed on the grand scale of who has power to say what race is. It's not me who has the power to say that. But boy, when I get the opportunity, do I try to take some power back and claim my own story, which may be mixed to some people. But I don't want to identify as parts of different things, because I'm a whole person. I am not parts of different things. I am a whole person. This is me, right? So you did just touch on something, and I wonder if we could just go back and say something. You just said something about the identified as different things throughout your life. That's what it was. There are people who have only identified as white throughout their life, or only identified as Black throughout their life. And that is to be honored. We should not be shaming people who are white or shaming people who are Black, right? They are who they are. It is a part of their identity if they claim it to be so. And I want to honor that, right? If it doesn't hurt them and it doesn't hurt anyone else, I want to honor it. But not everyone does. And it causes some of us pain to have to try to fit it into one of those boxes. So here are those tears that I was feeling earlier. Sometimes it takes a minute for a space to get safe, for us to get into, the more vulnerable stuff of what it causes to constantly feel like you're othered. And so if you do identify as white or Black out there, I want to invite you to consider something over the next week, however, in your own time. I want to invite you to consider moments where you have not checked the box of being white, if you've identified as white, or moments if you identify as Black where somebody has told you you don't check the box of being Black. Because I can almost guarantee for most of us, we have moments where somebody has said something that has been ascribed to being white or black that you have not checked the box of? I know a great example of this, and I will share this very shortly because I know we're coming up on time, is more than once, right? We now have a female vice president in Kamala who is a black woman, would identify as that's a piece of her identity. And yet, I have heard several times since she became vice president from black identifying people, now she's less black. Now she's a little more white. They have said this out of their mouth. And I know it's not just people in my neighborhood who are saying this. Around the world, people are saying that she's lost a few black points. She doesn't check as many boxes of being black. Now, I cannot pretend to understand the depth of that because I do not identify as a black person. But I bet if we were to have someone here speaking with us now, that they could illuminate what that means to them, that she now doesn't check as many boxes. Does that make sense to you, what I'm offering?
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to register why they would think that, and I can't comprehend it. So,
right. And so there could be layers to the position, the title, how she talks, the way she dresses, how she does her hair, what she chooses to associate with as far as dining or music. There's all these different pieces now that, again, I'm not going to pretend to understand what it means to a black person to say that you are black, period. Right. But that's what I want to invite, people who do feel like they're solid in one point, is to start asking, where have you not met the criteria, quote unquote, right? To start offering some perspective for those of us who have never met the criteria, to let me claim my own stuff. Let me be who I am on this earth, the short life that I get here. Let me be me, and let me honor you in saying, let me also let you be you. Let's do that as human beings.
I can respect that.
Thank you. That was nice to hear. I can respect that. Thank you. I think I needed that. And I love this for the listeners out there. Even if she doesn't agree with me, she can respect that, right? I haven't asked her if she'd agree or anything like that, but she can respect it. It's a beautiful another tool that we should be practicing. We're moving into the final piece here, the closure. Now that we've had this conversation session, what are we taking away from it? You want me to go first? You want to go first?
How about you go first?
Yeah. I'm taking away a sense of validation, I think, primarily. I think it's been nice to say in one more space that I own this story, that this is my story. It's my truth because I've lived it, not because I read about it or I grew up hearing it from other people. This is my story that I have lived, that I'm experiencing. And there's something really nice about getting to own it. Just one more time, one more space, and say, this is me, period. I feel like I'm all of the showman here. Like I should now be advertising for the showman. This is me, Oh. Yeah, and I think there's something really special also about getting to speak with you, who's my sister, about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm sure that's going to come up. Well, Nina, you got to have your conversation with your sister. You knew her. Well, we shall deal with that as it comes, my listeners. But I digress. What are you taking away from this? What's sitting with you? We don't have to process it, but what would you like to share?
Well, one, you need to check your license and figure out what race you are. Okay? That's one thing I'm taking away from this. Two, that I think your story is probably really common because just, I feel like there's some things in my life that I can relate to that too with, and that, maybe they need to change that race question and just get, straight down to it. What color is your skin? And then they just give us a gradient there.
Yeah, skin profile.
A makeup gradient. Or Sherwin-Williams comes in and they give paint samples and we just identify with like, I'm a sandy beach. What are you? I'm more of a creme caramel, like you said. I wouldn't mind identifying as that.
Yes.
I think, for me, I think race, what it's coming down to is what color is your skin, because the ethnicity question kind of gets at more of your heritage and potentially what features you may have. But if you want to know what color of my skin is, just flat out and ask me.
Boom. Drop the mic. Also, we'll now be advertising for Sherwin-Williams at your nearest paint store. Oh my gosh. I mean, so this literally brings us to the end of this episode. We've gone through all the steps. I do want to thank you, Erika, for your time. I know that life is precious. You could be doing something else, and instead you're here, having hard conversations so we could turn them into teachable moments. Do you feel like we were successful?
I think so. I mean, it was fun. I mean, there's still, I think that little uneasiness and thinking of when other people listen to this, what they're going to think and how they feel. But I mean, it's a hard conversation, and I think it's something I would have otherwise been scared to have. But I mean, we had it, and we had some laughs, and we talked about some serious stuff. And I hope that when people hear this, it means something to them, and they take that and they have that conversation with someone else.
Oh, couldn't have said it better myself. Erika, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything, words of wisdom I feel like you just left the words of wisdom, though. Is there anything else you'd want to share for the listener out there?
Oh, I don't think so. I think that was it. Well, let's leave those as my words of wisdom. That's all the wisdom I got right now. Okay. Maybe next episode I'll give you more wisdom. But you got to listen to the next one to get it.
Erika, have I triggered you? Oh, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. That's all that we have for you. Even that moment, now I'm like, oh my gosh, did I just trigger listeners by saying in between? Well, I want to go back. Hard conversations, teachable moments. All you listeners out there of any gender, maybe gender's a construct also and doesn't exist. Stay tuned for next episode to find out. Otherwise, that's what we planned for you today, folks.
It's me again, reminding you that this was a throwback episode. I hope that you were able to take something from it, even one little nugget of wisdom, and use that between this week and next week, right? The purpose of these episodes is to give you tools. It is up to you to decide whether you want to become skilled in them. You picking up what I'm putting down? So take a tool, take something, a perspective, a moment, something that works for you, and use it in your life to transform hard conversations into teachable moments. To transform the way that you play with scary moments, right? To transform your life, to help make you the most courageous, most healing-oriented, most belonging person, right? No matter where you go, that you belong to yourself everywhere you go, right? Courage, healing, belonging, whatever it is that you are taking from this episode, take it with you, so that you can get out there and live your most vibrant life, you beautiful human being. Okay? All right, I'm signing off for now, but I'm gonna see you soon, okay? I'm gonna see you real soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for being willing to explore healing your humanity on Empowered Human. I hope you found at least one new way to transform your worldview from powered to empowered. If you took something from the show, please take a moment of your time and subscribe to Empowered Human. And if it really nourished you, leave us a review. Your feedback helps me understand what our community needs. Not to mention, it helps others discover the empowered human life. So keep this last bit in mind. All the visual goodies come with me on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina. Stay up to date there on upcoming episodes, behind the scenes goodness, and reels dropping knowledge. Thank you again for being part of the empowered human community. Until next time, stay curious.